Stop it! The voice cut through the diner like a gunshot, freezing forks in mid-air and choking off every breath. Snow rattled against the windows as the front door burst open. A former U.S. Marine stepped inside, tall and unmoving, his calm eyes hiding something dangerous beneath the surface. Before the man who slapped her could even turn, the Marine's canine was already there, teeth bared, body locked between the attacker, the woman, and her trembling puppy. "What hero?" someone sneered. Laughter echoed nervously. In the corner, a stranger quietly raised his phone and started recording. Coincidence? Or a trap? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and stay with the story. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, subscribe so you never miss another story of courage, redemption, and quiet miracles. Snow fell thick and silent over Silver Creek, Montana, softening the streets, dulling the lights, and wrapping the town in a cold that felt patient, almost watchful. Jack Turner pushed open the door of Miller's Diner after his late shift, the bell above the door chiming once before settling back into quiet. At 42, Jack carried the unmistakable shape of a former U.S. Marine. Broad shoulders, a solid chest, and a posture that remained alert even when he tried to relax. His dark hair was cropped short and threaded with gray, his angular jaw shadowed by rough stubble. Years of service had etched restraint into him. Anger no longer exploded outward. It pressed inward, controlled and contained. He wore a heavy brown work jacket dusted with snow, oil-stained gloves in one pocket, and boots that had learned how to stand firm on uncertain ground. At his side walked Titan, a 6-year-old German Shepherd canine with a powerful, athletic frame and a sable coat streaked black and tan. His amber eyes moved constantly, ears upright, body calm but ready. Titan had served with Jack overseas, and though the uniform was gone, the discipline remained. He did not pull at the leash or wander. He read rooms the way soldiers read terrain. The diner was warm, filled with the smell of coffee and frying oil. A few locals sat scattered in booths. Behind the counter stood Sarah Whitmore, the night waitress, a woman in her late 50s with a soft, sturdy build. Her silver hair was tied into a loose bun, her pale blue eyes kind but tired, shaped by years of night shifts and listening more than speaking. She gave Jack a small nod of recognition. He answered with the faintest lift of his chin and slid into his usual booth by the window. Titan settled beneath the table, eyes still scanning. A few minutes later, the door opened again, letting in a swirl of snow and cold air. A young woman stepped inside hesitantly, brushing flakes from her coat. Her name was Emily Brooks. She was 26, slim, with chestnut brown hair tucked beneath a knitted hat, and pale skin flushed pink from the wind. Her hazel eyes carried a quiet caution, as if she measured every room before trusting it. At her feet trotted a golden retriever puppy, no more than 6 months old, all clumsy paws and soft golden fur. His name was Sunny. He stayed close to her legs, tail wagging uncertainly, the world still new and too loud for him. Emily took a seat near the counter, resting a hand on Sunny's head, whispering to him softly. Titan noticed immediately. His head lifted slightly, not in threat but recognition. Something fragile had entered the room. The mood shifted when 3 men came in together, laughing too loudly as they stomped snow from their boots. The tallest was Mark Henson, early 40s, thick-necked with a square face reddened by alcohol and cold. His beard was uneven, his confidence careless and loud. Beside him stood Ray Dalton, shorter and stockier, shaved head gleaming under the lights, hands twitching with restless energy. The third man, Kyle Mercer, lingered behind them, younger and lean, with sharp cheekbones and a crooked smile that never softened his eyes. Their attention found Emily quickly. Mark leaned against the counter, voice slurred as he made a comment that drew uncomfortable silence. Emily stiffened, fingers tightening in Sunny's fur. Ray laughed and stepped closer, invading her space. Sarah spoke up once, her voice firm but restrained, yet the warning barely slowed them. When Emily finally asked them to stop, her voice was steady but trembling. Mark's expression darkened. In one sudden motion, his hand snapped across her face. The sound was sharp, echoing through the diner like a crack of ice breaking. Everything froze. Sunny yelped and pressed against Emily's legs. Titan surged forward instantly, placing his body between Emily and the men. His stance was rigid, controlled, teeth bared just enough to promise consequence without chaos. The room fell silent, every breath held. Jack stood slowly. The Marine in him roared to strike, memories flashing, nights when restraint had cost lives, and nights when losing control had taken them. His fists clenched, then loosened. He met Titan's eyes. One silent command passed between them. Jack removed his jacket and gently draped it over Emily's shoulders. He did not look at the men. He did not raise his voice. He guided Emily toward the door, Titan backing with them, never turning his gaze away from the threat. No punches were thrown, no threats spoken, only the sound of the door opening, and then the snow swallowed them again. Inside the diner, conversation did not resume right away. From a shadowed booth near the back, a man no one remembered seeing lowered his phone. His eyes had not followed Jack. They had followed Emily. He lifted the phone again and spoke quietly, his voice steady. "Yeah, it's her. She showed up." Jack Turner did not speak much as they stepped back into the snow. The cold bit harder now, sharper against the skin, as if the night itself were reminding them that nothing truly ended at the diner's door. Emily walked beside him, her shoulders drawn inward beneath Jack's jacket, one hand gripping the fabric tightly, the other resting on Sunny's leash. The golden retriever puppy stayed pressed against her leg, his small body trembling, nose low, confused by fear he had never known before. Titan walked on Jack's other side, close enough that his flank brushed Jack's knee with each step, his head low, ears rotating slowly, reading the silence behind them as carefully as he once read streets under fire. Jack told himself he was only doing what any decent man would do, getting a shaken woman home safely. He told himself he was not stepping back into anyone else's trouble. Trouble had a way of finding him anyway. The streets of Silver Creek were nearly empty at this hour. Snow clung to the sidewalks and softened the edges of parked cars, turning the town into a muted sketch of itself. The streetlights flickered, halos of yellow swallowed by falling white. Emily finally spoke when they reached the corner, her voice quiet, almost embarrassed. She thanked him, not with the nervous rush of someone desperate to be saved, but with a steady sincerity that suggested she was used to handling things alone. Up close, Jack noticed the faint red mark already blooming on her cheek, a sharp contrast against her pale skin. It stirred something uncomfortable in him, a memory of moments when standing by had never been an option. He kept his voice neutral as he told her it wasn't a problem, that the night was cold and people were stupid when they drank. Emily nodded, though her eyes remained alert, scanning the darkened windows along the street. She introduced herself properly then, Emily Brooks, and Jack gave only his first name in return. Some habits did not fade easily. They reached the edge of the industrial block where Jack's garage sat behind a low chain-link fence, the building dark except for a single security light humming weakly above the side door. Emily's motel was only 2 blocks farther, but Jack paused, something tightening in his chest. Titan had slowed. The German Shepherd's gait shifted from relaxed escort to deliberate patrol, head lifting slightly, tail stiffening. Sunny tugged once at the leash, then stopped, sensing the change in the larger dog. Jack glanced down at Titan, recognizing the signs he trusted more than his own instincts. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, more to ground himself than to expect an answer. That was when he saw it. A black pickup truck rolled slowly into view at the far end of the street, its headlights dimmed, tires crunching softly over fresh snow. It did not speed up. It did not pass them. It simply followed, keeping a careful distance that might have gone unnoticed by anyone not trained to look for patterns in the dark. Jack felt a flicker of irritation at himself. Silver Creek wasn't exactly crime-free, but it wasn't a war zone either. Trucks drove slowly on snowy roads all the time. He forced his shoulders to loosen, telling himself he was projecting old ghosts onto a quiet night. Emily noticed the truck too. She didn't point it out, but her grip tightened on Sonny's leash and her steps shortened, cautious. Sonny glanced back once, then looked up at Titan, tail dropping uncertainly. Titan did not bark. He did not pull. He simply adjusted his position, placing himself half a step behind Emily and Sonny, as if widening the shield around them. Jack kept walking, deliberately unhurried, counting steps, listening to the rhythm of the truck's engine. It slowed when they slowed. It stopped when they stopped. They reached the garage. Jack unlocked the side gate, the metal creaking softly. He turned then, fully facing the street. The truck idled at the curb, dark and anonymous, its windows tinted too deeply to reveal the driver. Snow settled on the hood in slow, deliberate flakes. For a moment, nothing happened. Jack almost laughed at himself, the tension ridiculous, the silence empty. Then Titan growled. It was not the sharp, explosive bark of a startled dog. It was low, sustained, vibrating through his chest. A sound Jack had only heard when Titan identified a real, immediate threat. The growl cut through the quiet street like a warning flare. Sonny whimpered softly, pressing into Emily's legs. Emily inhaled sharply, her eyes fixed on the truck now, fear no longer hidden. Jack's hand moved instinctively to Titan's collar, steadying him, not to restrain, but to reassure. The truck's engine revved slightly, just enough to be deliberate, and then the vehicle pulled forward a few feet before stopping again, as if testing a boundary. Jack stepped half a pace forward, placing himself fully between Emily and the street. He raised his chin, meeting the dark windshield with a hard, unreadable stare. He did not shout. He did not gesture. He simply stood, rooted, the way he had learned to stand when retreat was no longer an option. Titan's growl deepened, teeth just visible beneath his lips, his body coiled but controlled. After several long seconds, the truck rolled back, tires crunching, turning slowly at the corner before disappearing into the falling snow. Silence returned, heavier than before. Emily exhaled shakily, her breath fogging the air. Jack finally released Titan's collar, running a hand briefly along the dog's neck, grounding them both. He told Emily she should go inside the garage until she felt steady, that he would walk her the rest of the way once things settled. She nodded, though her eyes never left the empty street. As Jack locked the gate behind them, he felt the uneasy certainty settle into his bones. The truck had not been lost. It had not been curious. It had been watching. The power went out just before midnight, not with a bang, but with a soft, unsettling click. The garage lights dying as the wind pushed harder against the walls, and the snow thickened into a blinding curtain. Jack Turner was midway through locking the side door when the darkness settled in. He stood still, listening, the old Marine habit returning without invitation. The silence felt wrong, too complete, too deliberate. The backup generator down the street did not kick on. Somewhere beyond the fence, a loose sign rattled, then stopped. Titan, who had been lying near the workbench, rose to his feet at once, his body shifting into a rigid line, ears forward, head angled toward the street. The German shepherd's amber eyes reflected the thin glow of moonlight through the high window, and Jack felt the slow burn of certainty tighten in his chest. This was no coincidence. Emily Brooks sat on a crate near the office door, Sunny curled against her boots beneath Jack's jacket. She had insisted on waiting inside the garage instead of walking back to the motel in the dark, her voice calm but her hands betraying her. The bruise on her cheek had deepened into a dull red shadow. She looked smaller in the dim light, shoulders drawn inward. But there was a quiet steadiness in the way she held herself, the posture of someone who had learned not to panic even when fear pressed close. Sonny, 6 months old and far too young to understand danger, lifted his head at Titan's movement and let out a soft, confused whine, his golden fur ruffling as the cold crept in. The first knock came from the front gate. Not loud, not polite, just firm enough to announce intent. Jack moved without thinking, stepping between Emily and the door, one hand resting lightly on Titan's collar. The second knock followed, heavier, impatient. A voice carried through the wind, slurred but confident. "Emily Brooks," it called. "Come on out. We just want to talk." Jack's jaw tightened. They had not guessed her name. They knew it. Emily's breath caught sharply, her fingers digging into Sunny's fur. She did not ask how they knew. She already understood what that meant. Jack opened the side door instead of the front, stepping into the snow so the wind tore the words from his mouth before they could linger inside. The blizzard hit him full force, stinging his eyes, filling the world with white motion. 3 figures stood beyond the fence, dark shapes against the snow. The tallest was Mark Henson, his thick frame wrapped in a heavy coat, beard rimed with frost, eyes glassy but focused. To his right stood Ray Dalton, shorter, barrel-chested, his shaved head gleaming under the streetlight, shoulders hunched as if ready to spring. Kyle Mercer lingered a step back, thinner, restless, his sharp face half hidden beneath a hood, eyes darting between Jack and the door behind him. They were the same men from the diner, but the laughter was gone now, replaced by something colder. "This doesn't concern you," Mark said, raising his voice over the wind, his words clipped. "We're here for the girl." Jack did not answer. He took another step forward, boots crunching into the snow, placing his body squarely between them and the garage. Titan moved with him, shoulders aligned with Jack's thigh, a silent wall of muscle and intent. Ray sneered, spitting into the snow. "Get your dog and move," he snapped. "You're just in the way." They rushed him then. Not all at once, Ray first, lunging toward the gate, Kyle following, trying to circle wide. Jack met Ray head-on, shoving him back into the fence with a force that drove the breath from his lungs. Kyle slipped on the ice, cursing, scrambling to his feet. Mark moved past them both, eyes fixed on the open door, on Emily. "Grab her," he barked. The words snapped something loose. Titan exploded forward, clearing the distance in a heartbeat. He did not go for the men at first. He went to the door, placing himself directly in front of Emily and Sunny, body broad, stance immovable. Ray recovered quickly, swinging a metal pipe he had pulled from beneath his coat. The blow caught Titan along the ribs with a dull, sickening thud. The dog let out a sharp bark of pain but did not retreat. He lowered his center of gravity, teeth bared, growl rolling from his chest like thunder trapped in flesh. Jack felt it tear through him, the old instinct to end threats permanently. But he forced it down, tackling Kyle before the man could regain his balance, driving him face first into the snow. Mark reached the doorway just as Titan lunged, snapping inches from his arm, forcing him back. Ray swung again, desperation creeping into his movements. The pipe struck Titan's side once more, and this time the dog staggered, breath hitching. But he held his ground, placing his body sideways, shielding Emily and the trembling puppy behind him. Sunny yelped, scrambling backward, and Emily dropped to her knees, one hand reaching for Titan, even as Jack shouted her name, telling her to stay back. The sound of sirens cut faintly through the wind. Someone had called them, or perhaps the power outage had triggered an alert. It was enough. Mark cursed, grabbing Ray's arm, dragging him away from the fence. Kyle pulled free from Jack's grip, stumbling backward, panic etched across his sharp features. As they retreated into the white blur, Kyle turned once, his voice breaking as he shouted over the storm, "She drew the wrong place, and now it's too late." Then they were gone, swallowed by snow and darkness, leaving only the wind, the broken quiet, and Titan standing, breathing hard, ribs bruised, eyes still locked on the empty street. The storm did not ease after the men vanished. It only shifted, the wind lowering its pitch, the snow falling steadier now, as if the night were settling in to listen. Inside the garage, Jack Turner bolted the doors and pulled a heavy work light closer, its yellow glow carving a small island of warmth out of the cold darkness. Titan lay on his side near the office wall, breathing shallow but controlled, his powerful chest rising unevenly. The German Shepherd's sable coat was dusted with snow and streaked with grime, and a dark bruise was already spreading beneath the fur along his ribs. At 6 years old, Titan was no longer young, but he was still strong, still disciplined, his amber eyes tracking every movement Jack made. Sonny sat pressed against Titan's back, small body trembling, golden fur puffed out in fear, his round eyes wide and glassy. He nosed Titan's shoulder once, then stayed still, as if sensing that noise would make things worse. Emily Brooks sat on a low stool nearby, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee Jack had poured without thinking. She had changed into an oversized sweatshirt Jack kept in a drawer for cold nights, the sleeves swallowing her wrists. Under the harsh light, she looked exhausted, the earlier shock draining away to reveal something heavier beneath. The red mark on her cheek stood out against her pale skin, but it was her eyes that told the deeper story. Hazel, steady, and tired in a way that did not belong to someone her age. She watched Titan breathe, guilt tightening her jaw. "I didn't want this," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm, as if she had rehearsed the words long before this night. Jack did not interrupt. He knelt beside Titan, running careful fingers along the dog's side, checking for swelling, keeping his movements slow and reassuring. Years ago, in another life, he had learned how to assess injuries under worse conditions. This one would hurt, but it would heal. Titan shifted slightly, accepting the touch without complaint. Emily took a breath and continued. She told him about the truck stop outside Clearwater Ridge, miles north of Silver Creek, a lonely stretch of highway where semis came and went through all hours of the night. She had worked there for almost a year, pouring coffee, wiping counters, learning which drivers wanted silence and which wanted conversation. She described the place plainly: flickering fluorescent lights, cracked vinyl booths, the smell of diesel that never quite left your clothes. It was there, behind the building, that she had first seen the mounds of disturbed earth beyond the tree line, patches of ground that glinted strangely under moonlight. She had a habit of sketching when things felt off, of drawing landscapes to understand them, and one night she had drawn that area from memory, noting the shapes, the unnatural symmetry. Her voice tightened when she spoke about the container. She had gone outside during a late shift after hearing noises, thinking a driver might need help. Instead, she found a metal shipping container partially hidden behind a line of pines. Inside were crates, equipment she didn't recognize, and Sonny, then barely old enough to walk, tangled in a rope, left with a bowl of frozen water. She had freed him without thinking, panic drowning out reason, and that was when she heard the voices. Men arguing in low tones about routes, about timing, about keeping the site quiet. She hadn't understood everything, but she had understood enough to know she was somewhere she should not be. Jack listened, his expression unreadable, but inside him the pieces were already aligning. Emily explained that she left the job within days, packed what little she owned, and drove south without telling anyone where she was going. Silver Creek had seemed small enough to disappear into. She had kept the sketchbook with her, not as evidence, she said, but because throwing it away felt like lying to herself about what she had seen. Sonny had stayed with her because leaving him behind felt worse than any danger she imagined. "He didn't choose any of it," she said, her fingers tightening around the mug. "Neither did I." Jack stood and walked toward the back wall of the garage, his movements deliberate. He checked the doors again, then the windows. Then something made him stop. Near the exterior panel beside the office window, a faint scuff mark caught his eye, barely visible beneath the dusting of snow that had blown in through a crack. He crouched, brushing it aside, his heart rate slowing in that dangerous way it did when certainty set in. There, wedged beneath the lip of the siding, was a small black disc, no larger than a coin, its surface dull, unnatural against the aged wood. He pried it loose with the tip of a screwdriver, turning it over in his palm. A listening device. Cheap but effective. Emily watched him from across the room, understanding dawning without explanation. Jack exhaled slowly, the breath leaving him heavy. The men hadn't followed her from the diner by chance. They hadn't found her only because she made a mistake tonight. Someone had been watching, listening, long enough to know where she was, long enough to wait. Titan shifted, letting out a low, tired huff, as if confirming what Jack already knew. Jack looked down at the dog, then at Sonny, who had finally curled against Titan's side, eyes half closed, exhaustion overtaking fear. Jack straightened, the old resolve hardening behind his ribs. He had not wanted to get involved. He had tried to stay small, to live quietly, to keep the past buried. But this had started before Emily ever walked into that diner. It had followed them here. Morning arrived pale and brittle, the snow from the night before packed hard against the streets of Silver Creek like a warning that refused to melt. Jack Turner drove with both hands steady on the wheel, Titan lying across the back seat on a thick blanket, his breathing slower now but still guarded, amber eyes following every passing shadow. Emily Brooks sat in the passenger seat, shoulders wrapped in her coat. Sonny curled against her legs, the golden retriever puppy finally asleep after a night of fear. The garage had felt too exposed after the discovery of the listening device, and Jack had decided they would start with the police, even if his instincts told him the answer might not come easily. The Silver Creek Police Station was a squat brick building near the town square, its windows fogged with heat, the American flag outside snapping sharply in the cold wind. Inside, the air smelled of old coffee and disinfectant. A middle-aged officer at the front desk took their statement without comment, typing slowly, his face impassive. He was polite, distant, and unhurried in a way that made time feel suddenly expensive. Jack noticed how the officer avoided Emily's eyes, how he did not ask follow-up questions about the men or the truck, how the report seemed to disappear into the system rather than settle anywhere solid. Titan lifted his head once, ears flicking, then lowered it again, restless. They were told someone would look into it. No timeline, no urgency. Jack thanked them anyway. Old habits again. As they turned to leave, another officer stepped out from a side hallway, adjusting his duty belt. His name tag read Officer Daniel Price. He was in his mid-30s, tall and lean, with sharp cheekbones, a neatly trimmed dark beard, and eyes that were too watchful for a casual glance. Jack recognized him immediately. Price had been in Miller's diner the night before, seated near the back, nursing a coffee. Titan recognized him too. The German Shepherd rose with a sudden tension, a low growl rolling through his chest, his body angling protectively toward Emily and Sonny. The sound echoed off the tiled walls, drawing attention. Price stopped mid-step, surprise flashing across his face before smoothing into a practiced calm. "Easy there," he said, voice even, palms open. He smiled at Emily, the expression rehearsed and thin. "Looks like you had a rough night." Emily nodded stiffly, her discomfort unmistakable. Jack met Price's gaze and held it. There was nothing openly wrong with the officer's posture or tone, but something in the way he stood, too aware, too composed, set Jack's nerves on edge. Price glanced at Titan once more, then stepped aside, allowing them to pass, his eyes following until the door closed behind them. Outside, Emily exhaled shakily. Jack said nothing, but the tension in his jaw tightened. Titan settled again only once they were halfway down the block, though his ears continued to swivel. Whatever help they were going to get, it wasn't coming quickly from inside that building. Back at the garage, Jack moved with quiet efficiency. He photographed the listening device, copied Emily's sketches, and pulled the security footage from his exterior camera. Grainy, but enough to show shadows moving where they shouldn't have been. Emily watched him work, a growing realization taking shape in her expression. This was no longer about whether she could hide. It was about how far the danger reached. Jack stepped into the small office and closed the door, dialing a number he hadn't used in years. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered, roughened by time and distance. Marcus Hale had once stood shoulder to shoulder with Jack in desert heat and chaos. Now, in his mid-40s, Marcus carried the scars of that life in a different way. Short-cropped hair gone mostly gray, a thick build softened by age but not weakness, and a voice that never wasted words. A roadside explosion years earlier had taken 2 men from their unit and left Marcus with a limp and a permanent shift in how he trusted the world. After leaving the Marines, he'd taken a federal position, one that kept him moving quietly through places where lines blurred. Jack told him everything. The diner, the truck, the attack, the sketches, the listening device. Marcus listened without interruption. When Jack finished, there was a pause, long enough for Jack to wonder if he'd said too much. Then Marcus spoke, his tone sharpened by focus. "You did the right thing calling me," he said. "Send everything." "Now!" Jack did. Files transferred one by one, the weight of the situation settling heavier with each click. An hour later, Marcus called back. His voice was lower this time, urgency threading through it. "Jack, whatever they're running out there, it's active. We've been tracking illegal extraction sites up north for months. Your sketches match a location we flagged but couldn't confirm." Jack closed his eyes briefly. Emily stood in the doorway, reading his face. "They won't wait," Marcus continued. "Intel says they're planning to clear the site. 48 hours, maybe less." The words landed like a clock starting to tick. Jack hung up slowly. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, light but persistent. Titan shifted at his feet, sensing the change in Jack's posture. Emily stepped closer, her voice quiet but steady. "What does that mean?" Jack looked at her, at Sonny, at the garage that no longer felt like shelter. "It means they're running out of time," he said. "And so are we." Somewhere in Silver Creek, a plan was already moving forward, and the town, for all its quiet streets and familiar faces, was no longer safe. Snow fell harder as night tightened its grip on Silver Creek, thick flakes swirling under the yellow glow of broken streetlights like ash drifting from an unseen fire. Jack Turner stood alone inside the garage office, the hum of the old heater barely cutting the cold. His face looked carved from stone, hard lines deepened by sleeplessness and the weight of what he was about to do. Years as a U.S. Marine had taught him how to lie convincingly when survival demanded it, but never to someone who trusted him with their life. Emily Brooks sat on a wooden crate near the workbench, Sonny curled in her lap, the 6-month-old golden retriever trembling despite the blanket wrapped around him. Emily looked smaller tonight, her dark hair pulled back loosely, pale skin drawn tight with fear. But her eyes were steady. She was not weak, just tired of running. Titan lay at Jack's feet, ribs still bandaged beneath his thick sable coat, amber eyes tracking every shift in Jack's posture. The dog sensed the lie before Jack spoke. They contacted me, Jack said quietly. Through a burner phone. He didn't add how easily they had known where to reach him. Emily stiffened. Jack continued, measured, controlled. They want you. They think if you come willingly, this ends. Emily's fingers tightened around Sonny instinctively. Titan lifted his head, a low, warning rumble forming, but Jack placed a hand on his neck. Easy, boy. Silence stretched. Then Emily spoke, her voice calm in a way that surprised even her. You're not telling me everything. Jack met her gaze. No, he admitted. I can't. He knelt in front of her, lowering himself so they were eye to eye. His features softened just enough to show the man beneath the soldier, the one shaped by loss, by a divorce that followed too many deployments, by years of choosing duty over safety. But I need you to trust me. Trust Titan. Emily studied him, searching for cracks. She found none. Finally, she nodded once. I trust you, she said. Titan pressed his head against her knee as if sealing the promise. The abandoned mine lay 20 miles north, beyond the plowed roads, buried deep in the forest where snow swallowed sound and direction alike. Once a silver operation decades ago, it had been shuttered after a collapse killed 3 men, an event that turned the place into a local ghost story and a perfect hiding place. Jack drove the old pickup slowly, headlights dimmed. Emily sat beside him, Sonny tucked under her coat, Titan braced in the back, muscles coiled despite the pain. Jack had texted the coordinates as instructed. A single message came back. Come alone. They didn't. Hidden among the trees overlooking the mine entrance, federal vehicles waited, dark and silent. Marcus Hale crouched behind a snow-covered boulder, his broad frame tense, one leg stiff from the injury that had ended his frontline career. His beard was heavier now, streaked with gray, his eyes sharper than ever. Years of watching corruption rot systems from the inside had stripped him of illusion, but not resolve. Around him, agents prepared quietly, breath fogging, weapons low. They were waiting on Jack's signal, and on proof. The mine yard flickered with portable floodlights as Jack's truck rolled in. 3 men emerged from the shadows, faces half-covered, boots crunching over ice. The leader stepped forward. Evan Cross, early 40s, tall and narrow-faced, with a shaved head and a scar slicing through his left eyebrow. His posture was relaxed in the way of men who believed control was permanent. You brought her, Cross said, eyes flicking to Emily. Smart choice. Jack stepped out, hands visible. I want this over, he said flatly. Cross smiled. So do we. What Cross didn't notice was Titan shifting in the truck bed, weight forward, eyes locked. Or Sonny, who had begun to whimper softly, sensing the danger before any human could. Emily's heart pounded, but she did not move until Cross gestured sharply. One of the men stepped closer. That was when Titan exploded into motion. Despite the injury, he launched himself between Emily and the approaching man, teeth bared, body blocking Sonny instinctively. A gun came up. Time fractured. Jack moved. Cross shouted. A shot rang out, clipping Titan's shoulder. The dog staggered but did not retreat, planting himself harder, growling through pain. Jack lunged, driving his elbow into the nearest attacker. The mine yard erupted into chaos as floodlights snapped off and on. From the tree line, Marcus gave the signal. Sirens cut through the snow like a blade. Federal agents poured in, weapons trained, voices commanding. Cross swore and bolted toward the forest, disappearing into the dark before anyone could stop him. 2 men went down, pinned and cuffed. Jack dropped to his knees beside Titan, hands shaking for the first time as he checked the wound. Stay with me, boy, he whispered. Titan huffed, tail twitching faintly, eyes still tracking the trees where Cross had vanished. Emily clutched Sonny, tears freezing on her lashes. The danger wasn't over. The leader was gone. And somewhere beyond the mine, the snow-covered forest waited, hiding a man who knew their faces now. Snow returned one last time to Silver Creek, softer than before, as if the winter itself were ready to let go. The town woke slowly beneath a pale sky, the kind that followed hard nights and harder truths. Yellow tape sealed the road leading north, and beyond it, the abandoned mine sat silent, its mouth closed by steel barriers and federal locks. What had been hidden for years was finally exposed, and the forest seemed to breathe easier for it. The investigation moved quickly once the arrests were made. The extraction ring collapsed under the weight of evidence. Records, equipment, money trails, pulled apart by federal hands that had been waiting for a crack like this. Evan Cross did not stay free for long. 3 nights after the raid, he was caught near the state line, exhausted, beard grown wild, a thin layer of frost clinging to his jacket. When the agents brought him in, he looked smaller than he had under the mine lights, his confidence stripped down to bone. Silver Creek watched the news quietly, absorbing the relief in private ways. Jack Turner returned to the garage and opened its doors again. The work felt grounding. Oil-stained hands, the familiar clank of tools, simple tasks that didn't ask him to choose between violence and restraint. He still moved like a Marine, shoulders squared, eyes alert, but the constant tension eased. Years of isolation had been a shield after his marriage ended, after deployments carved distance into his life. Now, the shield lowered, piece by piece. Titan recovered slower than Jack would have liked, but he recovered. The German Shepherd spent weeks resting on a thick mat near the heater, bandage changed daily, eyes bright with stubborn resolve. His sable coat dulled where the fur had been shaved, a badge of pain he wore without complaint. Each day he took a few more steps, tail lifting higher, the limp fading. When he finally trotted across the garage floor on his own, Jack knelt and pressed his forehead to the dog's, the gratitude in his chest too big for words. Sonny changed too. The golden retriever puppy grew fast, his paws too large for his body, his coat thickening into warm gold. He learned the garage by scent and sound, learned Titan's boundaries and Jack's quiet rules. Emily laughed more as the weeks passed, a sound that filled spaces that had once felt empty. She stayed in Silver Creek, renting a small apartment above the old bookstore, her sketchbook no longer hidden away. She drew again, snowbanks melting, pine branches heavy with frost, a garage door half open at dawn. Her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders now, her posture less guarded, though the experience had sharpened her strength. She was not naive anymore, but she was not afraid to remain. A new face appeared in town as spring hinted at the edges of winter. Sarah Whitman, early 40s, took over the diner after the previous owner sold it quietly. Sarah was tall and broad-shouldered, her build shaped by years of lifting trays and surviving long shifts. Her chestnut hair was cut short, streaked with gray she didn't bother to hide, and her skin bore the honest wear of someone who worked through seasons without complaint. She spoke plainly, laughed easily, and kept an eye on the room without looking like she was trying. The diner changed under her care. Brighter lights, better coffee, and a sense that trouble would not be tolerated. On the last night of snowfall, Jack, Emily, Titan, and Sonny stood outside that diner, breath fogging in the cold. The street was quiet, lamps glowing, snow settling softly on their shoulders. It was the same place where humiliation had sparked something dangerous, where violence nearly took hold. Now it felt different, not erased but transformed. Sarah locked up behind them, nodding in farewell, her presence steady and unafraid. Jack didn't see himself as a hero. Neither did Emily, who had simply refused to abandon what was fragile. Titan, leaning against Jack's leg, didn't understand the word at all. He understood only loyalty, the instinct to place his body between threat and life. Sonny sat in the snow, tail thumping, blissfully unaware of how close the world had come to breaking. Emily slipped her hand into Jack's, tentative at first, then certain. He didn't pull away. For the first time in years, he wasn't standing alone, wasn't measuring exits or calculating risk. The storm had passed, but its lesson remained. When the delicate things in life were threatened, they had chosen to stand, not for glory, not for recognition, but because someone had to be the last line, and sometimes that was enough. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, through a loyal dog that refuses to step aside, through a wounded heart that still chooses to protect, through ordinary people who stand firm when fear tells them to run. God often works this way, not to impress the world, but to save what is fragile. In our daily lives, we may feel small, unseen, or overwhelmed by darkness. But remember this: God sees every silent struggle, every act of courage, every choice made out of love rather than anger. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us which moment stayed with you. Subscribe to this channel to walk with us through more stories of faith, healing, and quiet strength. May God bless you and your family with protection, peace, and light in every storm.